My name is Karen, and I'm a 25-year-old employee. My grandfather, who raised me, passed away 6 months ago. Today, the lawyer will read my grandfather's will, so I'm visiting his house with my sister Susan, who is 4 years older than me and my only family. Our parents died in an accident 20 years ago, and since then, our grandparents raised us. After my grandmother died from an illness a few years ago, my grandfather's health began to decline, and he became frequently ill. Out of concern, I moved into an apartment near his house and often visited him. "You're a grown woman, it's unbecoming to keep coming back home," my grandfather would say, but he would always laugh cheerfully nonetheless. Then, one day, I found him lying in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called an ambulance, but my grandfather passed away just like that. "Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea." My sister's voice brought me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon," I responded and headed to the kitchen. Taking a quick glance, I saw Susan lazily stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning. I could still smell her strong perfume even in the kitchen, and I made a face. "She's the same as always," I murmured under my breath, placing the kettle on the stove. My sister has always been the type to only care about herself. Once she hit her teens, she started dyeing her hair and hanging out with delinquents. She was always out and about, demanding money without working, even when she caused trouble and our grandparents had to apologize on her behalf. She remained unbothered. I, being the quiet one, often had to deal with the fallout. She doesn't seem to have changed much, even after becoming an adult. She doesn't have a stable job and seems to just drift around while working part-time. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money whenever I wasn't around. It was easy to imagine that she would have found this all too troublesome if it weren't for the inheritance. "Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today." I heard my sister's high-pitched, formal voice, indicating that the lawyer had arrived. I hurriedly placed tea leaves into the teapot and headed towards the entrance. "Thank you for coming today," I said. I had met the lawyer at the funeral. His eyes were as kind as my grandfather's, and a lawyer's badge shone brightly on his chest. After offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait, he took a sip of the tea I served and then took out my grandfather's will, which had been entrusted to him while my grandfather was still alive. The contents were as follows. My elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, and I, the younger daughter, was to inherit this house and the land it sits on. Upon hearing this, my sister burst out laughing. $20 million in cash for the elder daughter and only an old house for the younger one. How hilarious. "It's just right for someone as plain as you," she sneered. "It's not just the house, there's also the land," I retorted. My sister laughed slightly. "Ah, the value of this land in such a god-forsaken place is hardly surprising. Ah, I would have preferred cash. I guess Grandpa must have had a soft spot for me after all." I can't deny that I am a bit shocked. I suppose my grandfather wanted me to protect his beloved house and land, where he spent his life with my grandmother. "A house and land? That's pretty awesome, isn't it?" Brian, my boyfriend, explained in surprise after hearing my story. I shook my head, implying it's not as great as it sounds. "Not really. My sister inherited $20 million in cash. That's more impressive." I felt a sense of emptiness saying it out loud. Even though I was being modest, verbalizing it felt like an acknowledgement. "Wow, beautiful and has money now. She's the better victory," Brian said insensitively. I shot Brian a side glance for his comment. Realizing his gap, he joked, "Your comfort means more to me than money, Karen." Brian has been my boyfriend since I started working. We met at a social event, and being the same age, we clicked well. I've introduced him to my grandfather and my sister. While he hasn't proposed yet, I have been considering marriage. Today was our first day in the wild, and I ended up telling Brian about my inheritance. I suppose it was because I thought he would become my husband someday. I had no idea I would come to regret this. A few days later, I visited the family home I had inherited from my grandfather. I intended to clean and sort out his belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. I figured I could manage it on my own and looked around, pondering, it's close to my workplace, maybe I should move here. Living here leisurely with a cat doesn't sound too bad. There would be no rent to pay, and while there might be maintenance costs, I have been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Maybe someday with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin planning. Just then, I received a call. My sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. Says, "What's up?" "Hey Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house?" My sister seemed to be drunk. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. "Since you're drinking, aren't you? It's still afternoon," I pointed out with a sigh. "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes," she exaggeratedly sighed back. "I was thinking about moving here eventually," I answered, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Really, I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now." My sister raised her voice in an exaggerated way. "Guess who I'm with right now?" "I have no idea." "Boring. It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you." "What?" "I'm sorry, Karen." Brian's voice took over the line. The sudden intervention of Brian threw me off balance. Dizzying question marks popped up in my head, but I couldn't ignore the disgusting thoughts forming in my mind. Surprised. "Ah," my sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch." She boasted about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked. He told her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence. "Karen, I'm really sorry." Brian's voice came again. "Tell me it's a mistake." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. "What?" "I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right?" The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions away. I felt a cold sensation like my blood was being drained from me. "You know what? I don't need a man like you," I said. I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister. "Well, that's how it is. From now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke," she said, ending the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lagged behind, all I could do was cry out. 5 years have passed since then. I had a cat in my lap, dancing off in front of my laptop. The cat was purring contentedly in its sleep. Today was my day off, but I still had a bit of work left from what I brought home. "Oh no, this won't get the work done," I thought. I felt guilty, but I had to move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. "Hello. Karen, long time no see." I instantly knew who it was in Francie. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. "It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can't tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister." 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. "You're just the same. Either way, I came home, and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell the house?" "That's none of your business." "Oh, come on, it's quite a grand hotel." "Ah, you must have made a good chunk of change." "Ah." Getting fed up, I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years. Now, she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around with, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. "So, lend me some money." Against Susan's yelling, I answered calmly. "I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way, but on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood." I started talking slowly. 5 years ago, When Brian broke up with me, I was crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured as large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. As feelings of nostalgia and loneliness welled up and tears started to come, I felt something drop from the back of the frame. Picking it up, I saw it was a fresh sheet of notepaper addressed to me. I remembered how, when I was little, I used to stick notes on the back of this frame and exchange secret messages with my grandfather. It was like a family journal, really. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured I'd find this note. I'm glad I noticed, I thought, shuddering at the idea that I might have left it unnoticed. To Karen. The date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you'd definitely notice this letter. Right now, we're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner cash to your sister in an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, who cared for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me. No matter what, Grandpa thought more of me. I thought, deeply hurt by Susan's words at that time. Despite having loved my grandfather more, a kind of jealousy still lingered. I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa, I thought. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I wanted to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way. If at first glance Susan appears to have received a better deal, she won't pay attention to your share. According to your grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value of this land will surely increase in the future. When I read this far, my eyes widen in surprise. You can't live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. Oh, lie. When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clipped her tongue and said, I lived in the house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house, just like grandfather's letter suggested. The land value had risen enough anyway. I'm never lending you money, I declared. Susan seemed frustrated, but, as if she had a good idea, she said, Right, if you want, I can't give Brian back to you, so help your sister. It's a good deal, right? At that moment, something snapped inside of me. Enough was enough. You've been taken care of by Grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly sat up cold blocking, and my cat, cowering on the bed, looked up at me with wide eyes. I picked her up and said, I'm sorry. After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try? They were probably being moved to a different location. As I watched the two of them, I was filled with a sense of melancholy. My husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. Are you okay? He asked, always concerned, looking at me with gentle eyes. I'm okay. I have you and this little one, I said, touching my fairly noticeable belly and smiling back. In my belly, a new member of our family was growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable, I thought. That's what I want to teach our child. With my husband by my side, I knew we could create a loving and happy family.